Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me this afternoon, we have Astha Malik, Chief Business Officer of Braze, Prioleau, co-founder and CEO of Simpli.fi, and Christian Ward, EVP and Chief Data Officer of Yext. We're here to discuss why companies must navigate shifting legal standards, emerging technologies, and changing consumer expectations to build trust in the brand. It is great to have everyone with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And Astha, let's start it with you. If you could give us a brief explanation of where Braze sits within the data ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Braze is a Nasdaq-listed software company, and we're a leading and comprehensive customer engagement platform that connects and integrates consumer data from mobile apps and all connected devices to provide brands a better understanding of the consumers and their behaviors, and ultimately help them create the most relevant communication and best experiences. And that also fosters loyalty and trust because the way the data is being used, and loyalty at every interaction, which is, of course, good for business growth. So that's what we do at Braze.
All right, we're happy to have you with us. And Frost, if you could tell us about Simpli.fi.
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. Simpli.fi is an advertising success platform. We're very focused on delivering workflow software that helps advertisers become more efficient and more effective, and programmatic advertising solutions that help them buy the most effective advertising across all digital platforms.
All right, and Christian, tell us about Yext, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So Yext is the digital experience platform that powers thousands of brands around the world, all of the objective knowledge that you learn about a business. So whether you want to know where they are, who they are, what they do, all of that objective knowledge and information is provided through our platform to search engines, AI, and systems around the world to ensure the consumer journey continues.
Yeah, and Astha, let's talk about how businesses are data dependent, and consumers perceive how their data is being used. Because typically we sometimes think about data from a very technological standpoint, but really it does impact our daily lives as consumers because brands, marketers, communication experts, they're using it to target and as a key driver to building their businesses.
Yeah, definitely. And, data is just the foundation for driving those experiences. Without that context, without that insight, brands can't really communicate well with the consumers. And I think, brands are in a relationship with their consumers, right? So it's the kind of relationship where you have to listen, where you have to show up at the right time, you have to say the right things. And without that context and without our understanding about the consumers, brands are unable to do that. So I think we at Braze understood that way before a lot of other companies did when we were founded 13 years ago. I don't think first-party data was actually even a term at that point, but we have a very strong legacy in first-party data, and we've been empowering consumers to make those choices by providing the right information to the brands that they're interacting with, and driving those meaningful relationships and just more relevant conversations that they're looking forward to, instead of just showing up at the wrong time, being a distraction, and not driving any results.
Yeah, and for us, it's really interesting. Sometimes you get ads that are targeted to yourself, and you're almost like, how did this brand even know that this was something that I was thinking about? It's just really quite incredible how data is being repackaged and targeting consumers in such a way.
Yeah, it's really a double-edged sword. People don't want to feel like advertisers are creepy or following them around. And it's the point, how do they know about this? But at the same time, it's a real service in many cases to see an ad that informs you of a product or service that you're really looking for. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's one the industry has been walking for quite a while. I think it's always interesting to compare digital, which I think is under a little more scrutiny than the direct mail you see in your mailbox every day. Who knows an awful lot about you with every credit card, including your name and your home address. So it's digital, and I think it's fine. It's under a little more scrutiny, and we in the industry need to step up and respect that.
Yeah, and I would imagine, Christian, that with AI now impacting the space as well, it's going to become even more targeted and an experience that we probably haven't even have any insight into yet in terms of what its capabilities are.
Yeah, it's actually, I find it amazing. We all learned during the pandemic that the right message at the right time to the right person actually is creepy. People were talking to their significant other, and suddenly there's an ad for Aruba, and you've just mentioned it. That's why digital is under such scrutiny, is it's so real time. And so it causes significant difficulty for consumers. But with AI, I think you're really going to see something of a major transition from more of ad targeting to offer targeting. Because remember, as I speak to an AI and I ask, like Search GPT coming out from OpenAI, if I talk to it and it asks me questions about what I'm actually looking for, it can winnow down from an audience to a very personal dialogue. And that's really based on zero-party data leading to first-party data. So there's a huge opportunity to move away from just audiences and tracking and re-identification to where a dialogue brings brands to offer something direct and personal. That's a huge opportunity being brought by AI.
I also think when you are interacting, let's go with a generative AI platform as an example, rather than asking questions, but telling it, commanding it for an outcome, I found that even just using it as a layperson, you can see the differences in the results and where it takes you from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we just heard about like AI is that the broader application of AI is also sometimes misunderstood. For us, obviously, there's a lot of hype right now around Gen AI, which is around, again, like, the way we use it at Braze is for empowering like our marketeers to use automation for better productivity, whether that's content generation, whether that's image generation. But then there's the other aspect of like really understanding the consumer behaviors and patterns better. And that is how you serve your consumers the most relevant information. So when you're browsing for a new movie, you want to make sure that the choices that you're getting are the ones that you really want. And that is not possible unless you're willing to share that data. So I think the first party data benefit is that consumers are giving you the right to reach to them, and they're giving you the permission to reach out to them based on the information that you're sharing with them. So that's why I think companies who are investing in a solid foundation of these first party data, building those first party relationships, are going to be somewhat protected from like all the changes that the technology landscape, the legal landscape is going to present in the future years as well.
See, and we'll get to that in a moment, but Astha, you bring up a great point here where AI is nothing used and all three of your companies have been leveraging it for a number of years, but since generative AI became part of a consumer vernacular at the end of November 2022 and into where we are right now, it seems as if consumers have woken up, and data and what emerging technologies have the capability to do is more in the forefront than perhaps it might have been before, when you're kind of looking at, say, Facebook ad, and all of a sudden, you're looking at new tires for your car, and it's all that comes up as tires. I just don't think consumers perhaps thought about it when it was in its infancy like it is now.
Yeah, and I think that's the part about like others have pointed out here as well, the creepy part or the dark patterns that a lot of companies use, where you're not expecting a brand to reach out to you for the information that you don't think they have or you don't want them to have. So companies in the past have relied on even like IP monitoring or third-party lists, and the data that they're buying or getting in other sources where the user hasn't given them the consent or the permission. And that's really creepy, and that's the hard part. And I think going back to the zero and first-party data, it really eliminates those challenges, builds this trust. In fact, again, drives the behavior where consumers want you to interact with them. So even our own research shows that consumers want brands to reach out to them if it's going to drive meaningful value. So if you're on an app, on a fitness app, and you want somebody to continuously tell you that you're behind, or encourage you or motivate you, those are the kind of actions that consumers are really looking for, and that's possible by giving consent on first-party data. And that's a meaningful difference between what you have like learned by sort of like means that the consumers is not aware of versus where consumers have given the consent, and that drives a completely different interaction and completely different outcome for both companies and users.
Ross, I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about Google's decision not to deprecate the cookie. And if you could almost give us some background here, because I feel with Google, when it comes to search, it's almost became synonymous. I'm going to Google something versus saying I'm going to search something. So why is this? What's the background behind it? And why is this a significant moment in time that we're talking about this?
Yeah, I think marketeers and a lot of companies have been preparing for this deprecation for a long time now. And the sudden sort of like, shift in thinking and how Google has revoked its stand on it is not really that surprising to me. If you look at what Apple did with ATT policy, that's exactly where this is trending. You're giving the consumer the right to opt out instead of like Google taking the onus of like, just making it a mandatory ask for all users, or like, being in conflict with brands. So I feel that this was a clever way of like getting to the same sort of outcome, which is empowering the users to make the choice. And I think that's where, the future is heading as well. Just more power to the consumers, more awareness for the consumers, and more consent for the consumers.
Frost, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, what the impact could be to consumers, a little bit more background on it. And then are there solutions to what Google is doing with cookies?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, they announced they were deprecating cookies, I think, first in 2020. So this has been a long road, and they've pushed it out multiple times along the way. And then to Astha's point, in a lot of ways, it wasn't that surprising given the regulatory scrutiny that Google was under, and not to make a decision that was benefiting them. And so this is what they'll basically get to the same place. And Google's essentially following Apple's lead on deprecating cookies, and we'll get to the same place. The industry has been preparing for this for more than 4 years. A lot of the signals we get in advertising or in the advertising thing are cookies, or don't rely on cookies anyway. If you think of the growth of CTV advertising, that really doesn't rely on cookies. If you think of the growth of mobile advertising, that is very few cookie signals. And so we're just talking really about desktop and tablet advertising and browsers. And the industry has been preparing with alternative solutions for a long time. What's interesting to me is the headlines. You always see the headlines when Google or Apple are doing something to deprecate identity, but there are many industry efforts. Our team tracked like 60 different privacy-friendly cookieless identity solutions that advertisers and brands can use to make sure that they're tracking and identifying audiences in a privacy-friendly way and delivering relevant ads to them.
Something to add on to that, Frost, because I think it's fascinating that we all look at this from a regulatory perspective, and we should. However, it's not great idea generally to look at the spirit of a law and then look at the cookies in the detail of the law. So we have tons of people saying, hey, we're going to do re-identification. Just because it's not being done by a cookie doesn't mean it still doesn't violate the spirit of the regulators, which is they don't want you knowing all of this data about individuals without consent. And so for businesses that are using re-identification, you're really just getting around that, no, it's not a cookie, but you're still tracking, and we're still ending up in that same sort of creepy space, which is a major concern from the regulators' perspectives. I think just businesses have to be careful about this, which is if you're just re-identifying or trying to create audience segments still without consent, just by reconnecting the dots behind the browser, that's not going to go well with regulators either. So we really have to think about, in this world, as you said, Jill, where AI is allowing people to have conversations, and those conversations can get to real detail, businesses have to think about, how do we get the knowledge that will help someone want to deal with my brand into those AI systems in real time across the highly fragmented search landscape? Because as Joe, you said, it used to be, Google was always a verb. I think Google's losing the hold on the verb, certainly with the younger generations. They don't say, I'm going to Google it. And so you're starting to get into this world that as more AI allows people to engage, that back-end identification is going to have consent. As Astha said, it's a very different approach. So people need to be careful about just violating the spirit.
Yeah, just to be very, very clear, the 60 I was talking about are completely privacy-friendly, opted-in identity solutions. To your point, you are correct. There are some fingerprinting solutions that are not in the spirit of the law or the spirit of the regulations, but the ones I was referring to are all opted-in, privacy-friendly, regulatory-friendly, within the spirit of the law, and other ways that people are opting into and saying, hey, there's a value trade between some information about me and the content that I'm consuming and the type of ads that power that content.
What I think is interesting, and you had noticed this, Christian, in your notes, is almost that the consumer is killing the cookie, not necessarily a regulator or brand choice or Google's choice. Because now you're talking, to platforms such as Google's Gemini, right? Or if you're talking to other generative AI applications. I mean, to be honest with you, and I'm, of the generation where I'm going to Google something, I have to tell you, I use Gemini in a very different way than I had expected. And I find the search to be more complete than perhaps just, going into search, help me find this or that. So I feel like they're going to have to shift that strategy around as well, because I'm sure brands and advertisers are losing key data for that reason.
Yes, I think most marketers at every brand that we talk to, they are starting to understand that the KPIs and the data that they have been grown used to over 25 years, the only reason you see keyword data from Google is because it's enticing you to buy ads for particular keywords. The AI systems are not going to share dialogues with you around what people were talking about in their private conversations. So it's a complete shift where the consumer is being empowered through these AI interactions. But that data, there's almost no reason. If you look at the preliminary demonstration that Search GPT put on their site yesterday, this is what you're going to see. It's very similar, which is almost a two-panel platform where the dialogue that goes on between the human and the AI generates dynamic offers or dynamic citations, as we call them, so that people can have trust that the AI is actually doing this properly. If that works, then you could see people trying to have offers or ads in that dynamic panel, but it changes very quickly because we're moving from keyword speak to general human language. And that's going to be a massive change for the type of analytics marketers can gain to understand what consumers are looking for.
But that's the beauty of it, though. There are no ads. And we're able, it's not as if whoever kisses the ring and pays for whatever SEO optimization, that's what comes up. And that's what I enjoy about using generative AI platforms. And I feel as if it's just going to be a repeat, let's call it Web 2.0 of how we know it now, when it's just a much better consumer experience. And Astha, what I think is interesting, it literally happened overnight. Your strategy when it comes to brand advertising and marketing, I mean, it caught a lot of people off guard, I would imagine.
It did, but at the same time, I think, many companies were already preparing for it and like for a number of years as well, right? I think, again, going back to what we said earlier on, the landscape is pretty dynamic. And I think the best brands out there know that what exists today might change tomorrow. Even when you look at, just the privacy laws, I think the EU has been a dominant force in enforcing that. But, US is catching up. We've got more than 20 states, like, just modeling their privacy laws based on GDPR. So things are continuing to evolve, and they're going to be like pretty unpredictable. So again, what brands can do is like look at this as an opportunity to think about what other investments they can make to mitigate the risk that they have against some of these unknowns. And again, going back to just making sure that you have your first party data assets there to really support you no matter what comes your way. That can almost like provide a little bit of protection no matter what's happening in the legal landscape outside. And again, I think it has other benefits like we talked about. So, that empathy for the customer, that understanding that the customers are giving you the consent, they're telling you what they want, that changes that relationship. So, just investing in zero and first party data from that perspective is not just good for the business from protection perspective, but also it's great from like building out that long-term, relationship with the customers and driving that loyalty and hopefully, that trust that consumers really want from all the businesses.
All right. Appreciate everyone's insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.